On September 16, 1943, 37 prisoners successfully escaped from a prison in the south of France. Among these people was the British spy Blanche Charlet. She was uncovered and arrested in 1942, and most of the agents in her group were tortured and executed, but Charlet was able to fool the investigators into thinking she was just a stupid woman who knew nothing and didn't understand how she got herself into this whole spy business. In November of 1942, she was sentenced to prison, and nearly a year later, she and her partner were able to disarm the guards and organize a mass escape, and just 2 months later, she returned safely to Britain and lived a long life until the mid-80s. This happy ending is primarily due to the very fact that the prison was French and the tentacles of the Nazi German army Abwehr couldn't seriously reach it. More often, things ended tragically. The German counterintelligence was not hesitant in its choice of torture and was merciless. For instance, another spy, Madeleine de Merme, was captured by the Gestapo as a result of a radio game, when after false cipher notes under Gestapo control, she was sent as part of a group to the German rear and, as a result, was immediately arrested by the SS who were awaiting her. She was transferred to Dachau camp in September of 1944, and the next morning on September 13th, she and 3 other women accused of espionage were shot in the back of the head. It wasn't a typical Nazi execution practice, kneeling in front of a dug-out grave and shooting the victim in the back of the head. According to an eyewitness, one of the victims asked to see a priest before she died, but was denied because there was no priest in the camp. And after the execution, the camp commandant ordered that all the jewelry the women were wearing be brought to his office. It is known for certain that there were at least 55 female spies in the French underworld during the wartime. Of these 55, half of the women died, and 12 of them were shot or sent to the gas chamber, and 2 died of disease. So one of these 12 was Violette Szabo, an English woman of French descent, who had volunteered for reconnaissance after her husband died at the front. While on her second assignment behind an enemy lines, she was accidentally captured by a retreating Nazi unit and sent to the Gestapo in Paris. For 6 months she was beaten and abused there, but did not give up any of the names. She was then sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp, where in February of 1945 she was shot, supposedly in the back, although there is a speculation that she was shot in the back of the head. Some of those who had been caught by the Nazis survived all the circles of the Nazi inferno. One such survivor was Odette Alloz. She was arrested in 1943 along with her leader, Peter Churchill. At first, the Abwehr took care of her. Then she was handed over to the Gestapo, where fingernails were pulled out, a favorite Gestapo torture, and her back was burned with a flaming poker. A unique twist is that she was tortured directly by a Frenchman who, as Odette herself recalled, was a handsome man, but he was clearly mentally ill. There is a misconception that the Germans rarely tortured personally and passed this on to the locals of the countries they occupied. This confusion is simply because of the Nazis were precisely sophisticated and versatile in their tortures, and torturing the victims at the hands of their own fellow citizens, Germans, was one of those sophisticated methods. It's pretty hard to believe, but Odette betrayed nobody, and she was sent to Ravensbrück, where a concentration camp hell awaited her. There she had convinced the camp authorities that she and Peter were related to the British Prime Minister, Churchill, and thus saved her and Peter's lives. The Nazis were hoping to use them to gain some kind of immunity in case of an Allied victory, but this did not help them. The camp leader was executed. Immediately after the war, when countless details of the atrocities committed there began to emerge, people were so shocked that the horrors of the war faded before them. In any case, torture and mockery were commonplace in most of the law enforcement agencies of Nazi Germany, whether it was interrogation in the basements of the Berlin Gestapo or interrogation of a partisan in the field headquarters of a regular military unit. It's indicative that the Nazis did not make any special adjustments for women, and often women had a harder time than men, since in addition to physical pain, they had to somehow cope with the psychological suffering of severe mockery and degradation. And of course, with particular cruelty, the Nazis treated the Soviet women spies who fell into their traps. Even the young age of the women, often simply young girls, did not embarrass them at all. We all know about the heroic deed of Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya, but there were indeed thousands of such fearless women on Soviet side. On January 17, 1942, 2 girls, Nadezhda Pronina and Maria Sinelnikova, were seized by the Nazis near the village of Karchashkino in the German rear of the Kaluga region. Here is how a local resident who was present there describes their interrogation. "I'll never forget how they beat that girl with the braids. The Nazi used the belt buckle and the boot heels, and then she fell down and jumped up, and he kept saying something in German to her. In German. And who is she? A German? No. And the other girl is sitting in the corner crying." On the next day, after being beaten and tortured, they were shot. These girls were 18 years old. And here is evidence of the execution of another Soviet spy, Vera Voloshyna, who was in the same reconnaissance unit as Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya. But because of the confusion after the battle in the beginning, they were forced to carry out the mission in different villages. And only much later, in 1957, it was possible to find out that Vera was executed on the same exact day as Zoya, November 29th, 1941. They brought her, poor girl, by car to the gallows, and there the news was dangling in the wind. There were Nazis all around, lots of them. They brought our POWs who were working behind the bridge. The girl was lying in the car. I couldn't see her at first, but when they lowered the sides, I was so frightened. She was lying there, poor soul, in just her underwear, and it was torn, and she was bleeding all over. Two Nazis, fat ones with black crosses on their sleeves, climbed into the car and wanted to help her to get up, but the girl pushed the Nazis away and, clinging to the cab with one hand, got up. Her second arm was evidently broken. It was hanging like a lash. A horrific detail. In those days it was already extremely cold, below 20 degrees Celsius. And if it is known about Zoya's torture that she was forced to stand barefoot in the cold, it is likely that Vera was tortured the same way, all night before her death. One can talk at great length about how the era in the middle of the last century was in itself murderous and ruthless, that atrocities are an attribute of any great wars, on any sides, that it is sometimes difficult to separate truth from fiction, that history is written by the winners, and after time, it becomes increasingly difficult to understand the true scale of violence on one side or the other. But there is the indisputable fact that the general doctrine of the Third Reich meant no mercy for the so-called people of the other sort. Even individuals who had done nothing against the Nazi regime and who did not belong to the Aryan race were clearly predestined to be exterminated or to serve as second-rate servants, since this was the main ideology of Nazism. And those who stood in the way of the Nazi regime were unconditionally doomed to a painful death, regardless of their age or gender or any other factors. And the fate of female spies who fell into the hands of the Nazis was not enviable at all. The punitive machine had no limits on the punishment that could be imposed on them in the most gruesome and torturous way that Nazism was capable of. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to X War History and also leave a like.